Hey everyone, welcome. This is Megan Van Wart, and today we are going to be painting our winter deer scene. So I'm really excited to paint this today with you all. Before we get started, I'll review the supply list. As you know, coming to these paint nights, you can use whatever supplies that you have on hand. Today I am going to be using acrylic paints. So for acrylic paints, you'll just need basic hues of red, blue, yellow, and then we'll use black and white for tinting and adding some shading. So basic primary colors. If you happen to have a green, great. You can grab your green. We're not going to use too much green, but we will primarily be using blues and yellows and oranges for the scene today. So feel free to take a minute to get your paints together or whatever supplies you're using. You'll also need a small plate of some kind to mix different colors. I like to use this palette with different wells to mix water to create some nice thin kind of opacity milky consistency that will give me a little bit of a watercolor effect. So I'll be using a little bit of that watercolor effect today in the class. You can choose to use that style or you can do your own thing. So I encourage you always to just go at your own pace and incorporate your own ideas along the way. So always just be yourself and follow your gut is always the most important thing. So what we're going to do to get started is we are going to take one of the bigger brushes that we have. I have a large flat tip brush. It's about an inch. It's not too bad. And I'm going to stick it right in my water cup just to get it a little bit wet. And I'm going to start with a dollop of yellow on my plate. And I'm going to grab my white paint. I just have that handy as well. So I just have a little bit of white paint. And I'm going to take my brush, kind of wipe the water droplets off so it's not like dripping with water. You can see that it's wet, but it's not dripping. That's always the area that we want it to be. And you're also going to need a paper towel of some kind just for any messes. You might have like a little drip here or there, so it's good to have that handy. So now that you have a little bit of yellow on your plate, I'm just going to take a little bit of my white and put that on my plate too. Perfect. And what we're going to do is we are going to start painting the background together. So I'm going to mix a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow together. So I have kind of a soft yellow. See how it's just kind of, I'm adding white to it. And by adding white to a color, it's using a tint. So I'm using white to tint the color. Nice. So I have like a nice soft yellow. I can always play around with the tone of this color or making it a different shade if I want to, or changing the hue, which is kind of changing it into a different color. What we're going to do is we're going to use our big brush and we're going to kind of create a little bit of a sun shape. So I'm just going to do a circle, and that's creating a white sun, which is really cool. And we're going to fill in kind of all around this, and we're going to start to paint the sky. So I'm just doing circular brush strokes around. Now I have like a lemon yellow. If you have another yellow you want to use, like an ochre, use whatever type of kind of yellow you have. I'm going to put a little bit of ochre in this. This is where it's kind of fun to have different colors and tones, different hues of colors. All pigments are a little bit different. So I just added a tiny touch of ochre. And one of the things when you paint is you always just want to find the right color that works well for you. You don't have to settle. So just use whatever colors you have. For me, I'm just changing the tone up just a little bit. I modified that hue as well, which is just a color in itself. So you can see I made it a little bit warmer. And I'm just going to paint this around my sun. And maybe down here as I'm working my way around, maybe I want to bring in a little bit more of this yellow again. I'm going to dip my brush in a little bit of water. Again, wipe off the droplets, but I'm going to use water to move around the paint pigment. So I'm going back getting a little bit more water. See what's happening here. Pretty cool, right? Now we're only going to go down, we're going to fill like the top 2/3 of this painting with the sky. So if you wanted to come in here and put in like a horizon line to say, okay, Megan, I'm going to stay above this line that I put right here, you can stay above that because we're going to be putting some ground down there. We're going to be working from this like yellow bright sun, and we're going to be murking in like an orange as well. So we're going to do primarily bright yellow around the sun. And this is just the background. This is just a bright, beautiful background. Don't hesitate to put a little pressure on your brush. I love using this water technique to blend the sky. It's so much fun. I am doing kind of circular brush strokes. If you wanted to switch the types of brush strokes you're doing, that's fine. It might look a little different, but it's totally up to you. But using a little water on your brush along the way is really helpful. Helps get in all those nooks and crannies. And just take your time. We're just filling in the background. That's the objective or the point that we're on right now. So any way you want to fill this background, feel free. My intent is to keep it nice and bright because we're going to layer some really beautiful trees on top of this. And I want the background to really stand out. So again, I have a little bit of this yellow. I have a little bit of the ochre. As I work my way out, I'm going to get a little lighter with the yellow so I can transition to the orange. So you can see how I did a little bit lighter of a ring here. Moving the paint pigment. I'm pushing down a little bit to really move the paint pigment out. You can see how I just moved that out. I'm going and getting a little water on my brush. I'm playing with the colors I have in my palette. And I'm just doing like a nice kind of water wash. I'm maintaining this kind of circular shape. Totally up to you if you want to do that or not. And I will start bringing in a little bit of a light orange soon here. So again, I want to stay above my horizon line. If you haven't made the horizon line yet down here, feel free to do that. But I'm going to take a little bit of red. And I'm going to put a small dollop of red over here, just a tiny little dot. And what I'm going to do is, with my brush, and I'm just cleaning it off, I'm going to take a tiny, look at that, tiny corner of red, and I'm going to mix it in here to make my orange. This is just kind of changing the color of the sky just a bit, and you can see it just gave it a nice tone of orange, kind of like a soft peach color. You can decide what you want this to be, but this will be a really nice subtle change. And I'll show you how to do some blending techniques to make this blend in. So getting some of this paint down. Cleaning off your brush, getting a little bit of water, and then you can slowly, look at this, slowly do some soft kind of blending rings into the yellow with the orange. So you can kind of bring the orange into the yellow and kind of work the paint in. Push. Give a little bit of pressure. Water on your brush helps to really help the transition of these two colors. This is blending. It takes practice, so don't kill yourself if you're like Megan. I don't know what's going on. You'll figure it out. It just takes a little patience and a little practice. You might have to mix more colors as you go. Don't worry about that. But the water will really help you with blending. So your goal is to fill above the horizon line. Doing some nice sweeping. I'm maintaining those brush strokes. I have a little bit of orange paint and I have water on my brush and I'm just working my way around. See how it really helped with the transition there? And this is a little lighter here. And you can always come in and add more paint. It's one of the things I always like to talk about in these classes is that just because you have an entire layer of paint down doesn't mean you can't change it or modify it. So I talk a lot about art is an evolution. It's really starting somewhere, and then you as the artist kind of get to control where you take it. So if you want to add more layers and more rings, or adding a little bit more orange or yellow here or there, that's all a part of the process. That doesn't mean you missed something or that you're not good. It's just something that every artist goes through as your painting builds and grows in itself. So you might see some areas you're like, okay, I'm happy with this part, but over here it looks a little funny. Don't worry, just let it dry and you can come back to it. But getting these basic layers down is really important. So like for me, it's a little lighter, kind of in between here. I'm just gonna see how it goes. I might add in a little bit more orange. But I'm gonna just make sure I fill all the way around. I am gonna add a little bit of orange. I did orange kind of in this right corner down to the bottom through over here. I am gonna add just a little bit in this top corner just so it's a little bit more balanced. But take your time. And using a little water will definitely help with you blending. So I always love dipping my brush in the water cup, and I wipe off the droplets off the end so it's not dripping off the end of the brush. And I'm still using this big brush. I'm still doing those rounded brush strokes. Now we're going to put a lot on top of this, so this does not need to be perfect by any means. So I want you to be able to just fill the entire background in. Take your time. If you need to pause the video to take a little bit of extra time, feel free. But I love this. I love the transition of the yellows. Some of you might be inspired of like bringing in a little bit of the orange, like in other areas, like a little bit in the middle maybe. You could make this as much of a like sci-fi sky as you want. Here, I'm keeping it pretty simple, but it's just, you can have fun with the layering if you wanted to, basically. So you could use the edge of your big brush to kind of add in some fun swirling. I'm not really going to do a ton of that. I'm going to keep it fairly straightforward because I'm going to do some beautiful tree layering. So in just a minute here, I'm going to transition us to doing the blue on the bottom because we want the whole top background to dry. So if you need to take a minute, if you're watching the recording, you can pause the recording to finish up your sky, but I will slowly transition us now to doing the blue on the bottom. So you want to clean your brushes as you go. So we're going to use the big brush again. And I'm going to have you find a blue of your choice. I have Blue Lake, which is kind of a mid-tone blue. I'm going to take a small dollop of this and put it on my plate right there. And it's not that much. You don't need that much. So again, I'll show you. It's right here. It's probably the size of a nickel, like entirely. It's not too much at all. The more you paint, the more you'll realize that you don't need a lot. A lot will go a long way. And I'm going to use some water. So what I'm going to do is I'm using these wells. I'm going to take 2 or 3 or 4 healthy dollops of water and putting it in the well next to me. So I have a little puddle of water. I'm going to take a scoop of half of this blue and I'm going to make a water wash. So I am doing this. I'm going to have a little bit of a watercolor-esque effect down below. It's going to help create different layers and textures. So I'm mixing this blue watery substance. It's pretty thick in color, which is good because that means there's enough pigment in it. You can see how thick it is in color. And my brush is wet, but it's not dripping. So it's good for your brush to never be dripping, but the wet is good. And we're going to paint, maybe you'll do a little bit of a landscape down here below. a little bit of a ridge line. It does not have to be totally flat. This is a landscape. So, and I'm going to slowly start to paint some of my landscape down here. I'm slowly dragging this brush down here. Now, you can do this any way that you want. You can do some highs and you can do some lows. This is where you can really have fun with experimenting a little bit. If you want to leave some white, maybe I'll put a little bit more water on my brush to loosen this up a little bit more. I'm doing some long, smooth brush strokes. Any way that you want to fill in this space, feel free. But you can see how my nice soft brush strokes are creating some really fun, beautiful texture. And I'm doing some high, and I'm going all the way from one side to the other. So it's okay just to kind of be in the moment when you paint sometimes, just to kind of see what happens. Because the worst thing that happens is you don't like what you do, and you can always paint over it or make modifications. It's not a big deal. So I always encourage folks just to kind of like let go of your fears and preconceived notions of like what your art should be, and just to be present, because your art will just happen. So look at the really fun, cool textures that I've created down here. It definitely kind of looks like a little bit of a snowy, shadowy scene, which is exactly what we want. We can always come in and add more details with some blue, darker blue shaded colors. But what we're doing is we're just getting a base scene in, and we're going to add our trees next, which is a really fun part. And we're going to do 3 layers of trees. We're going to do really, really light blue trees first. And that's going to be using the blue mixture that we just had. Now for me, I'm going to even lighten this a little bit more. So that means a couple extra dollops of water in my mixture here. And it definitely, you'll visually see it get a little lighter, which is really cool. It's like I'm mixing a little soup right here. And I am going to use a smaller brush. So for these long, tall trees, you could use this brush that we're using now. I'm going to downsize. Let's see. So take a minute and finish that bottom if you haven't already. The type of brush you're looking for is like a medium kind of flat tip brush. I believe in the packages, if you get any of the paint kits from me, it's kind of like a number 4, but a medium sized brush would be great. You could also use like a number 5. So if you have a large rounded tip brush, something like this is good too. So I'll use this more common brush. This is actually a number 3, but a medium kind of long rounded tip brush is fine. So I'll use this because it's more common. And I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet. It's better to start with skinnier trees and then make them thicker if you need to. In the inspiration that you can see over here, the trees are pretty narrow. So I'm going to have you kind of make your choices on how big or how small they are. But we're first going to do placement. So we're going to be putting in 3 trees right at the top of the horizon line. And I'm going to do it so my sun isn't like covered. So I want one to be over here. And what's going to happen is I'm going to start right at the horizon line, and I'm going to go all the way up to the top. Just like that. And I want it to be straight. So let me fix it a little bit here. And again, I have a little bit of a drip down here. I can fix that. And you can figure out how big you want your tree to be. And you want this tree to be really light in color. That's the intent. See how it's really light in color? It looks very mysterious. So just take a minute to do a really nice tree. Goes all the way up to the top. You can see it's not overly thick. And I'm using my pinky to stabilize my hand. Maybe it gets just a little wider right here. And it's going to land right at the top. And then What you can do is you can add a couple of branches if you want, kind of coming off. This is a tree, right? So take a minute to add some branches. So I kind of like to stagger from the left to the right. And this is that nice soft color. So maybe there's another one here. And they don't all have to be really straight. You all know that. And then you can do some secondaries. You can use the end of your brush. This looks soft because it's in the distance, and that's the intent. Cool, right? All right, so just take a minute. I like to use the tip of the brush. I have skinny branches. See how it's really light? That's intentional because we're going to do more trees kind of layered in. This will make the scene look a little mysterious. So you can add as many or as few of these branches as you wish. Just kind of lean back in your chair and just make some of those decisions along the way. And you can always come back and add more to that tree if you wish. For me, I have a little bit of a gap here. And I'm going to call that nice and simple. I'm going to do 2 more of those trees. You can do the same style trees or you can do others. I'm going to do 2 more of those over here. So take your time. And I'm just going to go straight up. I'm just going to make sure this is straight. Straight-ish, right? You just want it to be. And you want these trees to be fairly similar in width, just because we're creating a forest. And most forests have a similar, sister-like trees nearby. Doesn't have to be straight like a phone pole like mine. That was very straight. But I'm going to create some branches here. Again, I'm leaving my moon as like this highlighted spot. You have these primary branches and then you have secondaries. The secondaries are a little skinnier. And I alternate my way. I can have some lower branches. Have fun with it. Basically, painting trees can be hard sometimes, so just finding a style that works for you is really important. Painting trees, you always do that primary tree trunk, and then you do primary branches, and then you do those little secondary branches after. So I kind of have a nice balance. These are really tall trees. There's like the canopy is kind of towards the top, which is fine. You can see I'm kind of being a little playful with different sticks and things. But they're hazy to the eye because they're in the distance. So again, I have one more tree I'm going to do. I'm just going to pivot this so I get a straight line. Straight-ish. And these tree trunk lines are going all the way to the top. And the next layer of trees that we'll do after this is going to be a touch darker. So we'll add a little bit more blue pigment to this watery mix, this water wash. Oops. Just go at your own speed. Some branches can kind of come over straight if you want them to. This is your painting, so you can kind of do this any way that you wish. Your branches should overlap. That's a natural thing that happens in the forest. Okay, so I have like a little bit of a scene going on here. You'll start to see it come together, which is really fun. I might do one lower branch down here just to see what happens. Just to break it up a little bit. And you can put little sticks and things in between if you need to. Okay. So I'll give everyone a minute to get those 3 basic trees in. We're then going to do 2 or 3 more darker trees. And the darker trees are going to kind of come down on our land. So I might stagger one over here. I might stagger one here and here. So kind of figure out, you want to keep your sun visible if possible. So that's the kind of the next challenge along the way here. So I'm going to grab a small scoop of my blue and I'm going to add it to my pigment, my watery mix, just to kind of bring a little bit more pigment back into the water. It's going to make it a little darker, a little bit more, hold a little bit more value, right? A little bit more pigment. All right, so I'm going to find, well, where do I want to put the next tree? So for me, I might stagger one. I'll put one right here for sure. So maybe I'll just do the bottom of the trunk. Look at that. And then I'll do that line that goes straight up. So you're going to rinse and repeat. See how it's a little darker? Rinse and repeat with a darker blue. See how it's a touch darker? You can always make it darker, but you'll see mine's going to be pretty dark here in a minute. See how it's touch darker? That's exactly what I wanted. Your tree trunk can be the same size. It could be a little bigger if you wanted to. I primarily, and I'm kind of grounding this tree trunk down here on the land, which you can see. See that? I'm kind of like giving it a little home down here. Bottom of the tree trunk's a little wider. You can always change this while it's wet. You can always kind of smudge your finger around and change it up a little bit if you need to. Okay? So I'm going to just come up here, get my tree trunk in, and then I'll do my branches. So there's my tree trunk, and I'm going to do the same branches that I did before, and they're going to overlap. So I'm going to do a big primary. Sometimes at the bottom of these primaries, they're a little bit bigger where they connect to, and then I'm going to do some secondaries. Just do the gentle hand using the tip of my brush. And I can always come in and add some more paint so we can kind of cover up the transparency here. So if you wanted to use like a little bit more blue paint, maybe mixing a little bit of white. You can always use less water, like as an example. So let me show you what that looks like just for as a piece here. So if we use a lot of water, you might see some of the lines in the distance. So if you wanted to kind of take a little bit of white paint and just do full-on paint instead of less water for some of these next ones, you can. So you can play with that a little bit. Let me see what this tone is. This could work. So I'm just using paint right now just to show you less water. See how it's kind of covering up that landscape line, that horizon line in the distance. See how I covered that up right there a little bit? I'll probably use another coat. Oh, there we go. See how it covered it? If you want to do that with a little bit of like light blue paint, feel free. So feel free to play with that if you wish. And find a brush that works for you. It's always another important thing. So if you wanted to use just this light blue paint with not like the water technique for, moving forward steps, feel free. I added a little bit of water to this, but I am going to use a little bit more paint just so it stands out a little bit more. So I might go back over my branches just a little bit. See how it stands out a little bit more with more pigment. That is for your consideration. I'm just creating this tree. I am going to have one that kind of intersects with the moon just because I need a little bit more of a branch down here. So feel free to do what you wish with regards to where you feel like you need branches for your tree to be well-rounded. So I'm using light blue paint. I'm going to just do my tree trunk here and just rinse and repeat. Take your time. I do primary branch and then I do secondary little branches. And I alternate from the left to the right. And just use your eye. Some branches can be more straight, some can be a little bit more narrow. You can kind of decide the style and what works best for you. So you can see how these trees in the distance, we're going to put a deer down here. So that's why we're creating a little mini forest. So you're going to rinse and repeat. I'm going to do another tree. Maybe I'll do another one right here, right in between. And again, the bottom of the tree, maybe I decide where I want the bottom of the tree to go. That's maybe helpful for placement. Ooh, this is like a little wider. Let's just manage that a little bit. There we go. So placement, we're trying to be intentional of placement, right? These trees are a little closer to us, so they're going to be a little further down in our scene. And these trees in the distance are further away, so they're further back in our scene on the plane per se. And I'm going to bring this tree trunk all the way up. Sometimes you have to be a little brave. It's a little scary. I recognize that with these tree trunks, but once you get the hang of it, you got it. And the trees can be a little wider at the bottom. If you look like you have a bunch of phone poles, make it a little skinnier at the top, maybe make it a little wider at the bottom. Play with that feature a little bit. And you want nice, smooth lines. The intent today is we're not going to do a ton of detail like on the trees itself. We're really focusing on creating the scene with layers upon layers, putting in our deer, and then we'll bring the foreground together with some really nice texture and a little bit of nature. So I'm going to continue with these brush strokes for these branches, starting on one side, going from the left to the right. So of course, always take your time. Some folks are the details you really enjoy going a little slower. If you have any questions or you need any support through today's class, feel free to send me an email or drop a comment on this video. I'm happy to respond to you. How about you may get to the end of this painting and say, Megan, I'm missing something. What is it? I can help you with those things too. This is where we have this really funky nature scene that we're creating. And I'm doing very gentle brush strokes with the tip of this brush. The brush I'm using is the number 3, but look at the ends of these bristles. So find a brush that works for you. See how nice and thin they are? Because I'm paying attention to the bristles at the end of this brush, and it's just working for these branches. I'm doing soft, gentle, gliding brush strokes to create these primary branches and these secondaries. And my goal is to try to have all these trees be sort of similar. Sometimes it's hard if you're not used to painting trees. I recognize that, but just do your best. For me, they kind of look like they're all in the same family. That's what I'm going for personally. I do want to make sure that my branches are connected well to my trees. They're not just floating. So I'm using this paint, so I really want to make sure that they're a little more connected. Some of these were a little more watery, which kind of made them look a little more detached. But I think I corrected that there. So I'm going to look and say, okay, do I want to add any more trees of this color? Because we are going to do a purple tree, 2 or 3 purple trees on top of this. For me, I'm thinking about placement. I probably should do one more blue tree. But you can do a little bit of planning based on what you have. So as an example, we can kind of just talk through it together. So let's see, if I do purple trees, I'm definitely going to do, maybe I'll do a purple tree here, because my goal is to still see this moon here, or yeah, moon or sun, whatever you want it to be. I'm probably going to put a purple tree here further down, and I'll probably put another purple tree over here. So I'll probably do another skinny purple tree over in the distance. So you can kind of figure out where you want to put your purple trees, or if you want to add another blue one. I'm torn to add another blue one in the middle or not. I think I'll add just one more little blue one over here, just to kind of help create more of a forest scene. What I'm thinking through is I want more trees. Maybe I'll just put it right over here. I want more trees in my forest before the purple ones go on. So I'm creating just another one over here to help me create that scene or that look. So I'm just doing one more. So I did 3 of the mid-tone blues. So you can figure out what you have room for. Everybody's tree sizes are going to be a little different. So you can kind of keep that in mind as well. You just make a choice. Sometimes that commitment is a tough part of art, but it's something that all artists have to make as a choice and as a decision. What do I do? What not to do? That is the question. So I was a little courageous, so I'm putting another tree over here. I'm glad I did. This is where it's a great example of like the scene is kind of being created before our own eyes. And I'm just going to add a little bit of branching here. And you just visually need to make some decisions of what you want. And it's not always easy. And don't forget, your branches can overlap. That's no big deal. So I kind of brought that tree in. See how it looks more like woodlands over there now? That's what I wanted. Ideally, I should put like another skinny blue one over here. I might, just to kind of balance it out visually. And this is a good example of like why paintings just take a little bit longer sometimes, because if you're going for a woodland scene, you need to add more trees, and that's okay. And it's good that we're talking through it, because you're going to recognize for yours what your own painting may need or may not need. So I'm going to do one more skinny blue one over here, and then I'm going to layer more purples in. So if you are done or nearly done, just feel free to pause the video or go grab a cup of tea. I'm going to do one more over here to continue to build out my scene. And I'll just do a little one. I'm not going to go crazy. Maybe I'll bring it down just a little bit more. But trees are important for a wood scene. Imagine that. So for me as an artist, I'm doing what I feel is right for the scene in itself. And that's why art can take such a long time sometimes, because people really want to get their composition and their scene or their vision right. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that. There's a lot of people in my classes that like to take an extra hour or two. One, because they enjoy the process, but two, they really just want to play with the details and get the details right. And that's all part of the experience. See, I kind of grounded left to right. I'm glad that I added 2 more trees. Typically we want to do like an odd number of trees just to make it look a little bit more natural. But I'm just going to add in a few branches. Try to Give my branches a natural swagger. Try. No one's perfect, unless you're Bob Ross, right? God bless his heart. But see, I'm just gently creating this woodland scene. You can start to see and peer back in the distance with these layers that we've created, which is so fun. That's exactly what we are trying to do. Okay. So we have 3 tiers of trees that we're doing. We did the light ones in the back, we did the mid-tone blue here, and then we're gonna do a purple hue tree, which is gonna be so much fun. So I do have a small speck of red on my brush. We're going to mix a purple color. Now I have a little bit of this blue right here, this watery blue that's kind of hanging out. I'm just gonna take a little bit of red and just mix it right into that. And look at it, it's turning to be this like watery purple color now. How convenient. So I'm gonna mix that in. I want this color to have more of a blue tone. So this is more of like a purpley red color. I want it to have a blue tone because the trees all have a blue tone. So what I might do is put a little bit of blue over in another well. And I want you to find a purple that works for you. So what I might do is maybe take a little bit of this blue. Maybe I don't want it to be watery at all. Just find a purple. I'm going for like a dark purple color. You may need to add a touch of black to make it look a little darker. It depends on the blue that you're using. So for me, I might add a little bit of black to it. I'll show you how much black I'll use. I kind of have this like light bluish purple. I want a little bit darker of a tone than that personally. I have kind of 2 tones of purple. I have like a plum purple and I have like a blueberry purple. I like the more plum, but I need to add a little bit of black. So I'll get a little experimental with you all so you can check out what we're doing here. Okay, so with a little bit of black paint, put a small dollop of black paint on your palette. By doing that up front, and I'm still using this number 3 brush, using whatever, you're gonna keep using the same brush because we're just doing another round of trees. And then we'll switch to our tiny brushes for the deer and for the other detail. But I'm just gonna take a small dollop of black, put it on my plate. It's good to take a small dollop of black and put it on your plate because then you can control how much black you're bringing into another color. So I have a little bit of black paint on my brush. I'm going to bring that into this purple that I made to just darken it just a little bit. And that is beautiful. In person, it's like a lilac, a dark, I don't want to say dark lilac. It's like you can kind of see it's a grayish lilac color. Dark purple kind of lilac color. It's not too dark though. It's kind of a gray tone. I think that's perfect for this. So take a minute, pause the video if you need to, if you're watching after. And this can have a watery consistency to it, or it can be more pure paint. So I took a little dollop of water. I'm going to do a little bit of both just to show you. I took a dollop of water. I have a little bit of a watery substance. I'm going to start with the watery, see how it looks. I like the watercolor look, but you can be playful on what you want and why. So we are going to place the deer in the middle of the picture, and it's going to be behind one of these purple trees. So for me, I'm going to do a little bit of planning. My deer is going to kind of go right in the middle behind my finger. So I'm going to put a purple tree like right here so the deer can be behind it. So you're going to do your brush stroke down, but your tree is going to come down a little further. So see how it's coming down further on the land. You don't have to come all the way down like I did. I'm just giving you an example. So I'm just kind of grounding the tree. I can come in here with some dark purple paint, look at this, and kind of really make it stand out. The contrast is good. See how I'm making it darker? You could then do your straight line all the way up, like we have been for the tree. I'm doing a smooth, consistent brush stroke down. You want to go all the way to the top of the canvas. Nice clean tree trunk. That doesn't always happen. Let's go nice and smooth. And this is less water here. That's why it's really nice, solid pigment. If you see brush strokes, don't worry. Just like stop painting it and let it dry for a minute. That's always really helpful. Kind of ground the tree in any way that you wish. We'll do some more detail work down here, so don't go too crazy. But then I'm going to use finding those fine points of the ends of your brush again. We're going to do those. You can do a few tree branches if you wanted to. In the original, I didn't do a ton of the tree branches on the dark purple ones. I don't know why, but I am on this one. So we're just going to kind of be courageous. I like to make the primaries a little wider. Again, alternating from the left to the right. I don't know why this one had a little movement on the end of it. There, I made it a little straight. There can be some little branches that kind of come off with a little flick of your brush. You can put little sticks and things in between to make it look more natural. Trees are so unique, and the more you paint trees, the more you kind of like let go of what you think they should be, and you kind of lean into nature a little bit. Like this needs to be a little longer down here for me, so I needed to kind of come over a little bit more. This, you'll start to use your eye in new ways, which is kind of neat. So maybe the branches need to be a little lower for me. You can do, again, as many or as few as you wish of these branches. I like to kind of keep nice spacing in between the branches. Some branches can kind of come out more horizontal, some can go a little bit more diagonal. You can play with that. And there can be kind of like broken sticks or sub sticks in between. So like there's like a little half stick of a branch just to make it look a little more natural. And you want to bring those branches all the way up to the top. So it looks like your tree's like, this is a high forest. It's obviously like fall or winter because there's no leaves on these trees. That's kind of what we're going for. Okay. So everybody's doing great. Take your time with these trees. I'm going to do 2 more trees. So there's 3. I'm going to do a skinny one over here in between these 2 blue. I'm going to be intentional. And then I'll do another one over here. Maybe it'll come like right in this space. And then we will paint our deer behind this big tree in the middle. And then we'll do some of the grass work. But we're doing great on time. So just go at your own pace. And be mindful of how wide your trees are. Maybe I use a little water, maybe I don't. You can make those decisions. I'm going to make this one a little bit wider. It's always better to start out small, and then you can always make a tree trunk wider if you need to. And figure out, what does your tree look like on the bottom? Does it come out a little bit? Does it not? Right? You can decide how much or how little water you want to use. So continue that, and I will be right back. Okay. Okay. So the goal that we're doing or focused on right now is working on those trees. Again, I want an odd number. You can also manage, like, again, where you want to put them, etc. So many trees. There's so many ways to go about woodland scenes like this. It's kind of fun. It's obviously you got to have a little patience. And that's why sometimes it's nice using a little bit lighter of a color for the branches, so they you can either decide if you want them to stand out on one another or if you want them to blend in a little bit. They're totally different looks, and you can see I'm playing a little bit with that here. There's no right or wrong. Just use your own eye and make decisions based on what you've already implemented. So I am just, again, alternating from the left to the right side of the tree, adding some of those primary and secondary branches. A couple broken sticks in between. A little flick of my brush to give the end of that little branch a little point. So I think I'm happy with this tree over here. You can see how the scene is really being created. That's exactly where we're supposed to be. I have one more tree to put in over here, and I am going to we'll do our deer after. So I'm looking at placement. I want the other tree, maybe I'll do it like right in this area. So you can always do like some brush strokes to say this is where I want the tree to go. So you don't cover up another tree. So any way you want to approach planning of the position of a tree, you do you. But for me, I wanted it to kind of be in between those two. At least I try. I'm going to turn this so I can just get a straight line here. Sometimes when I paint from the side, I don't always get the line that I want. Imagine that. So I just turn. It's always just about, as an artist, you want to position yourself or reposition yourself as you need to in these classes so you're comfortable painting. So you might feel comfortable painting standing. You may be more comfortable painting sitting. You may want to lay your painting flat. You may want to use an easel. Anything works. Just figure out what's best for you. You may want to stand halfway through, right? That might sometimes feels good to kind of gain a new perspective, to feel grounded on your feet. Maybe you just want to stretch and stand and like evaluate and be a little mindful. Those are all good things. For me, I'm standing with a standing easel right now. But I do enjoy sitting as well. So you can always mix it up. Always mix it up. I think Bob Ross always stood. Doesn't matter. I've done a lot of both. So again, I'm kind of alternating my branches intentionally. And these need longer branches. So if you feel like you have stubby branches, make your branches a little longer. See what that does. Because these are big trees, right? Okay. And you can do more kind of like wispy like branches. If you feel like you want to use the end of your brush. Trees have lots of branches, so you can add as much or as little as you want here. And one of the benefits of these virtual classes, again, I want to thank you for being here, is you can take as long as you want. You can This video recording will be accessible to you after the class, which is really nice. I painted all the way off the page. And I have this really cool woodland scene, so you can really see all the work that we've put into this. You have this back layer of trees, which if you wanted to like take a really, really light blue and go in and kind of ground some of that, you could. I like the faintness personally. Then we have these mid-tier blue trees. Again, if you wanted to take a light blue and really solidify these, you could. And then these purple trees to really ground us in the foreground. Super fun. So we'll slowly pivot to the deer. I'm going to encourage you to grab a pencil for the deer to do a little sketching before you start painting. So we'll start with some of the characteristics. We'll talk through some of the characteristics of the deer. Deer have very long legs, not like giraffe long, but like moose long legs. And their bodies are pretty rectangular, as you can see. Their necks are fairly thick, and we're going to be doing this silhouette. So we'll first start out with maybe where we want our body placement to be and the leg placement. So body placement is good because you can do the legs at the same time, because the legs need to be touching the ground. The nice thing is that we can, since the body will be kind of in this yellow area, when the legs come down, there's ground in most of this space. So it will likely look natural or like fairly natural based on where you're at. So using your pencil, I want you to figure out where the back of the deer is. So I'm going to put the back of the deer here. I'm just doing lines so you can see some of those lines here. This is the back of the deer. I'll grab a Sharpie. God help me. This is probably not a good idea, but I'll grab a Sharpie so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So the back of my deer is here. That's its back. Now I got to figure out where its belly's going to be. Well, I know he's going to have a cute little tail. So if you want to do a cute little tail to kind of help get your imagination going, that's fine. And you can kind of round under its bottom and give it a little bottom. Again, you can kind of always change these lines. From the back, its neck is going to come up. And you can start to figure out how wide its neck's going to be. So you're all using pencil. So you can really be a little playful with this work. So you're basically going to round. The front, the neck is thick. The front of the chest comes out just a little bit. So for me, my body needs to be a little more in height. There we go. And my neck might need to be a little bit bigger. So then you can start to put a little bit of a curious head on top of the animal, right? And this is where you can figure out if your body needs to be bigger or not. So the leg will come down in the front. And this is where you really just start with some of these details. And my chest needs to come out a little bit more. The leg is kind of behind the chest a little bit. And I can always get some yellow paint, and because I'm drawing with fire here. And then the back on the butt comes down round, and then a back leg kind of kicks out and down a little bit. And it's a little thicker, so think of like a thigh, and then think of a skinny leg coming down. So mine's a little, it's very long, so I might need to make the body a little bit bigger, maybe a little higher on top. You can play with these things. And then I have a little leg kicking back. So just take a minute, and you can kind of You can give your legs little end caps to say, okay, are these legs long enough? Now these legs need to be a little longer in the front. Our deer will be painted a very dark color, so like a dark, dark purple. Maybe my belly needs to come down a little bit. My body is very, very wide, so maybe my legs need to come down a little bit more. See, for me, that helped. So maybe if you're the length of your body and your legs, compared to the proportions. So for me, that's a little bit better. The neck and the head on these animals is really quite tall. So what you can do is you can do a little bit of a sketch of like where you want the top of the head to be. And then I like to do these antlers just like lines to the left and to the right. So there's a line there for the antler. And then there's a line up there for the antler. And then I did some of these points right on top. Just to sketch. Okay, so you can see it's really looking more like a deer now. I extended the legs. I might even extend them more. And then these ears on the top of the head kind of come out, and they're like a little, I don't want to say too floppy, but they're kind of straight, and then they kind of come down. It's going to connect to the antler. So it's starting to look like a deer a little bit. I'm going to fix this ear. It's going to come down. Maybe I'll fix my head a little bit. Okay, so I have like Bambi in my forest today. That's okay. My ear is kind of tipped up a little bit. That's okay. Everybody's deers are going to look a little different. So I have a very small deer, I think. I can try making the legs a little longer with the paint. I'm going to stop with the Sharpie though, just so I can get the basic coats of paint in. And I'll bring my antlers to life more with the paint. So my ear is kind of tipped up a little bit. It's kind of cute. It was not intentional. But we're going to use like a darker purple for the deer, almost a black color. So you want to just use a small brush of choice. And take your time drawing if you need more time drawing. I'm going to use a small brush of choice. Any small brush works. I grabbed a number, this is a number 3. I think that's totally inaccurate, but it's all right. I'm going to grab a tiny touch of black with my purple, and I'm just going to make a darker tone. Nice. You could decide how dark you want your deer to be. You could even start with just one color and then change it if you want to. Again, this is just paint. It dries and you can always paint over it. So this is where we can just start filling in our deer. It's going to be a solid color. Now it's behind the tree, so you probably noticed me staying behind the tree as I was drawing my deer. So maybe I'm outlining along the tree first, just to kind of hold bounds. It's always fun doing the antlers. Make sure the back of that butt is rounded, and then the leg and thigh, back leg and thigh, kick back and out. But I love painting this woodlands creature into the scene. It's so much fun. Drawing animals can be difficult, so give yourself a little grace if you are struggling or if it's not the easiest. Practice makes an improved experience. Never makes perfect, but it improves your experience the more you do something. You'll probably need 2 coats of paint for some of this dark color. But think about the length of your deer's neck. Think about the size of your deer's head. Maybe extending the length of the legs will make it look more realistic. But get the basic coat of paint in first. I have a little fourth leg in here behind the tree, which you can see. It's just behind the tree, but I'm creating the illusion that it's there. There we go. And I have this curious deer. There's no face on this deer because it's a silhouette. If you want to put a face on it, go for it. I am not today. You can play with the shape of your ears. This ear is really big. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I might leave some lines and cover some of the lines up. So if you need to erase any of your lines, you're obviously using a pencil, hopefully. You're able to make some of those modifications, but you can always use a yellow or like a whitish yellow color to kind of refine where needed. Whatever those background colors are in this area. So you can see my little deers coming to life here in our woodland scene. I always save the antlers for last. It's so much fun for me. I love using the nice tip of the brush to do those antler points. My deer's ears are a little funky, but it's okay. I'm embracing it today. So these antlers are, there's this kind of basic ridge and then these little hooks and points. They can be longer. So in my inspiration, they're thinner and longer. So you can kind of make them a little taller and a little more thin. And if you want to put like a double kind of point on some of these, you could. It's totally up to you. And the ones on the ends are like really long, really tall. And you might have like an under horn on down here. So you can play this tall points using the tip of your brush. Find the brush that has nice fine point bristles. Look at the tip of the brush, and that will help you get the right. Pay attention to that tool you're using, and that will help your success to achieve what you're looking to do. But make sure you're using the right tool. And it's typically a little thicker as it like kind of where it connects to the head, kind of like a tree branch. So it can be a little thicker and then get a little bit more thin. That might make it look a little bit more natural. So you can play with that a little bit. Some of my horns are a little crazy today, but it's okay. I'm just embracing it for what it is. So I kind of made it go straight up a little bit. This is a big one. And I'm going to continue to work on these legs. Maybe these legs need to be a little longer. I can, again, paint the legs that I have, and if I need to make modifications, I can do that at any point. So I could make my legs a little longer. Let's see what happens if I do. This leg needs to be a little bit bigger. It's a little stick-like. So you might need to add like a little bit more like girth to your legs. You'll notice the front of my chest isn't really rounded either. The rounded chest helps a lot with the deer. My neck could also be like taller. So there are different things that I'm noticing that I'm talking through that are different from the last deer that I painted, which is fine. This is more of like a baby deer. So I'm just going to embrace this little deer with this large rack on its head. And it's all right. Many of you were using a pencil. You were probably noticing these details along the way. All good. But I'm just going to make sure these legs are nice and clean. Their little hoofs at the bottom are nice and clean. Some of you might have little Bambis like me too. All good. But you want nice clean coat of paint so it's totally filled and painted in. Nice. So I have a cute little deer in the woods. You all can play with some of these details. The other thing I was going to show you for today's class, along with your deer, is adding a little bit of grass and texture in your woodland scene. So if anybody has like a watery purple or a watery dark blue, I have the skinny brush that I was using with nice fine point bristles, and I have like a purpley watery consistency here. I want this to be nice and light. I love adding just a little bit of like grass here and there, so just some gentle flicks. Just adding in a little bit of grass here and there. You can go to a darker purple if you wanted to. It's kind of fun. This is just like a little bit of a watercolor-esque. You can just do a little bit kind of here and there. This is just bringing your scene to life. Just adding, if you wanted to do green down here, you could. I'm doing some kind of horizontals. I'm just using a really light hand, but taking your time. Again, feel free to, if you're watching this recording after the class, you're welcome to pause and play, be playful with some of these steps. But I like adding in some of this darker purple contrast because it matches some of these darker purple trees. And you can just kind of go at your own pace. You don't have to add a lot. I'm getting pretty close, pretty happy to where I want to be. Maybe you go grab a little bit of a watery blue, and you can do some blue accents as like another detail, just to kind of have it all kind of paired and matched. Help tie some of the blue back down to this nature scene. So I'm using a little water and a little bit of blue just to kind of do some, I'm doing some of these horizontal, I'm very light brush stroke sweeps kind of textures, just to kind of add in a little bit of like land texture on the ground. See, I'm doing some of these horizontal brush strokes, gentle sweeping, doing nothing crazy here. But you can build this scene into anything that you want. If you're inspired to put in another deer, you can bring in another deer. You're going to certainly come up with your own ideas. But before you wrap up, I encourage you again, take your time, but do any second coats on these trees. This purple tree in the front may need a second coat. Lean back in your chair and say, okay, is there anything else I want to add? You may need to mix more paints. But I love the way this painting came together. There's these beautiful tiered trees. You have the beautiful glowing sun in the background, and you have this really fun woodlands texture you've created with all these layers, with this beautiful deer. Everyone's deers are going to look totally different. You may be inspired to add flowers or a rock or other woodland creatures. I encourage you to incorporate whatever you wish into this painting. But most importantly, I hope that you enjoyed today's class. If you wanted to take another 10, 15, or 20 minutes painting today, feel free. I always encourage you to go at your own pace. But if you have any follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to ask. But it was such a pleasure being here with you today, and I do look forward to seeing your artwork. Take care, everybody.